welcome to Math with Miss Swartz. We are moving on from integers. Today we're going to look at order of operations. That doesn't mean we're no longer going to work with integers because there will be integers integrated into order of operations. We want to make sure we know our integer rules. But today our focus is order of operations. I'm excited because hopefully you've done order of operations for a while and you have some good memory. The thing you probably remember the most would be my guess of PEMDAS. It's a great way to remember the order of operations. When I was a kid, we talked about an acronym, of please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So however you remember it doesn't matter, but it is helpful to be able to know, okay, what operation do I need to do first? Then which one do I need to do next? So we're going to take a graphic organizer today to help us kind of sort through that and talk through the order of operations. So this should be in your notes. It's this nice little order of operations chart. As you can see at the top, there is a P. P stands for, you guessed it, parentheses. But technically, P can stand for any type of grouping symbol. So there's some different ones you might see on a regular basis. Obviously, the parentheses are the most obvious. But you might also see these brackets here. A lot of times you'll see the brackets on the outside of already where you have parentheses. And we'll talk about which one you would do first and those types of things. One instance I want to talk about where you may not realize that you do have parentheses is when we're working with fractions and we have addition or subtraction within our fraction. So something like this. I'm using variables as an example. If I use numbers, it would look like this. So 1 plus 2 over 3 plus 4. You may think, well, PEMDAS says I need to divide first and then I add or subtract. Well, we have to pretend, or we have to assume that there are these invisible parentheses here. Why? Because we can't divide if we don't know what we're dividing by. We can't divide if we don't know what we're dividing into groups. So we need to add or subtract before we would divide our fraction there. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions on that, please let me know. Going down to the next tier, we have E. E, we know, stands for exponents. So exponents look like x to the second power, or if you have a number, 5 to the second power, which is not 5 times 2. 5 to the second power would be 5 times 5, or 25. Remember, the base is what you're multiplying by itself, however many times the exponent tells you. What you may not realize is E can also include roots. Roots are the inverse of exponents. Roots are something like the square root of x, or the square root of 25, which is 5, which we'll talk about roots as we continue on in Math 8. You won't see roots very often within the order of operations problems. Moving down to our next tier, you see that they are no longer stacked on top of each other. They're on the same level. Why? Well, you know M stands for multiply, and D stands for divide. But we don't multiply before we divide necessarily. We just work from left to right when it comes to these two. So they're on the same level. They work at they have the same power to work. So if you see multiplying and division, you can do them from left to right. And the same applies for addition and subtraction. They're on the same level as well, and you're going to work that left to right. A lot of people forget that. We need to make sure we're working left to right when we're working in math. One extra thing I want to point out, because I know a lot of students can struggle with it sometimes, is the difference between parentheses as grouping symbols and parentheses that is denoting multiplying. Okay, so the question you have to ask yourself is, are these parentheses for grouping or for multiplying, okay? So the reason I bring this up is I'll have a problem like this on the board. Okay, so order of operation problem. You can see the +1 there. And students will raise their hand and say, Ms. Swartz, we need to do the parentheses first. What they don't realize is we technically do not have grouping symbols here. This is just telling us we need to multiply. So we have to make sure we understand the difference between the two. If we were talking about grouping symbols, it would look something like, like this. Now we need to do the parentheses first, the grouping symbol here. Some ways you might see multiplication written is like this, okay? You may have even seen it like this. We will probably start to use this less and less. As we go on to equations, inequalities, those x's may mean variables, so we don't want to use the x symbol for multiplication very often anymore. So the main types of ways you'll see them are with the parentheses and with the dot. If you have questions on that, please feel free to ask. So we're going to go ahead and do some examples together where we look at, okay, let's put this into action. So looking at the first one, make sure these examples are in your notes and make sure that whole last slide is in your notes. If we look at the first one, the first thing that pops out in my mind is the parentheses. So we want to take care of those. We can actually take care of the parentheses at the same time. So 5 minus 8, we're going to change subtraction to addition, change the sign of the next number, keep, change, change. So now we have different signs. Remember here, we're doing integer work. So we would have -3. Notice we have x's. I'm going to change them to dots. +1. And then I'm going to do this parentheses as well. 9 plus 1 is 10. So now I have multiplication, addition, and multiplication. I'm going to work left to right on my multiplication. So I have -3 times 4. They're different, so they disagree. And then I'm going to say plus 1 times 10, which would be 10. And to finish, I'll add these two together, different signs, subtract, and keep my sign on my larger value, which is 12. Notice I worked through each individual step. I didn't combine steps in one line, except for when I had parentheses here, and multiplication, I suppose. But I wasn't skipping over steps. I showed all my work. This is what's expected of you. All right, let's look at the next one. First thing I notice are the parentheses, so let's look in there. Remember, when you're starting with the parentheses, PEMDAS restarts, so we have to think about the order that we need to do within the parentheses. So we're going to do the exponents first. 6 squared is 6 times 6, which will give us 36. And then 36 plus 10 would give us 46. 46 times 2, we would do multiplication before subtraction, would be 92 minus 15. 92 minus 15 is 77. So again, I worked through each step. I showed all my work, and there we go. Last one we're going to do together here, and then I'll have you try the last 3 on your own. If you have questions on those, please, please, please ask. So I'm going to work within the parentheses first. I do have an X again for multiplication. I'm going to change it to a dot. You do whatever you would like. -2 plus 3 would give us 1. I'm going to keep it in parentheses. And -9 plus 7 would give us -2. So now I just have multiplication. I can multiply in any order, and this makes it really easy. 1 times 1 is 1. Times -2 would just be -2. All right. You can pause the video, you can write down my examples if you haven't yet, and then you can work on these last 3. If you're struggling with any of these, please raise your hand and get help. We're here to help. Once you are done with those 3, have a teacher check, and then we will give you your homework. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.